You're on.
Welcome, everybody, to the Just Add Bourbon podcast live feed on Facebook. My name is Jimmy Don Kerr.
I'm Brad Broaddus.
And I'm JD Dameron.
And we have a very special guest with us tonight, a fellow Kentuckian and a good friend of mine, Chris Tomlin. Chris, thanks for joining us.
Hey, I'm glad to be here. I haven't, it's not bourbon, but I got my whiskey here tonight. So
That's all good. Well, I'm off my whiskey. I'm on my Pepsi.
There you go.
Zero sugar. So, Chris, when we do these interviews, I always try to come up with a question, kind of like an icebreaker question.
Mm-hmm.
And the one that I have for you is this. Do you think Joe Burrow is going to help the Bengals?
Let me tell you something. Joe Burrow is the happiest thing to happen to this town in a very long time. And it is the most Cincinnati sports thing ever that we might not get a season. You know?
Oh, I know. I told the guys, Chris, on the podcast, we were talking about, the draft and how, it was different to watch the draft this year. And it was pretty cool. And I said, it would be the most Cincinnati Bengals thing ever if there was technical difficulties and we couldn't pick Burrow, like the time ran out.
Well, I mean, the Reds were going to be good. That's over. The Bengals are set to be good. They finally had a good draft. They did everything right in this draft. And I mean, I got so frustrated leading up to this draft with all the commentators who thought we didn't deserve somebody like him. It's like, that's not how the draft works. First of all, we're still an actual NFL team. People are acting like we weren't even a team anymore.
No, but you're right. You did definitely earn that pick. There's no doubt about it.
Yes, we did. Every bit of that pick.
Yeah, we've earned that pick for years. But finally, we get somebody in, and I love Burrow. I think Burrow can be a great NFL quarterback. They're going to have to get a line to protect him. But, if they can do that, I think it should be hopefully the future's bright for the Bengals, and we deserve it.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I get the Reds thing, but I don't get the Bengals thing at all. I just can't figure out the Bengals thing at all. Like, are y'all gluttony for pain or what?
Well, I mean, we're long-suffering UK football fans, and so the Bengals just kind of go right along with that.
Well, my story is that my grandfather got season tickets to the Bengals in 1970, right? And then when he passed away, my father took them over, and that was the early 90s. Well, that was a rough time to be a Bengals fan, early 90s. So he took them all that when my father passed away, it came to me. And I told my wife, I was like, I don't know. I don't know if I can justify doing this. And she said, this is as close as your family has to a birthright. You have to do it. You owe it to your dad and your grandfather. If they're ever good again, you got to be there. So I was like, all right. So
well, Brad said on the podcast, we were talking about it, and he said, when I was growing up, the team for me, like when I first started really liking pro football when I was, younger, was the Redskins. I've told this story 1,000 times. Was the Redskins, and it was Theismann and Riggins, right? So I always kind of had an affinity for the Skins. Well, Brad was talking about the Bengals, and he said, when I was coming up and I really started getting into it, it was when they had Boomer and Ickey Woods and James Brooks, and he was like, man, yes, I have found my team. We're good. We're going to win, and then nothing.
For a long time. There have been, man, I have seen in person so many terrible football games. I mean, only people that could probably compare are people who had UK football tickets for a long time.
I've had season tickets to Kentucky football for 20 years, and I have watched us get beat every way. What is it, JD?
I was at the -5 UK Vandy game. I don't know if it was that cold or not, but it was freezing to death cold, and we got blew out by Vandy.
Oh,
get home. Oh my gosh!
I was at the game.
I wanted to see myself.
There was nobody there. It was literally, you could have said everybody in Commonwealth or now Kroger Field in one section, and that was the game that Joker got fired. So, all right, let's get to why we've got Chris on here. Chris is the co-author of this book, Mitch, Please. And Chris, how does it feel to be called a New York Times best-selling author?
I'll tell you what, it's the kind of thing that when you as a writer, it's the kind of thing you dream about. Like, it's like if you're a high school hurdler, you dream about being in the Olympics someday. Even if you don't win, you get to go. You're always an Olympian, right? So same thing. I mean, it's kind of one of those things that you don't ever expect. And it's even sweeter to be able to call myself that because we weren't able to do any national publicity for this book at all. We had all this plan, and the COVID knocked all that through. And so none of it happened. And so all of our marketing was grassroots marketing in Kentucky. So Simon & Schuster was blown away when so many Kentuckians bought this book, and that made it was so bittersweet. It's sad because, you know, when the book comes out, you expect to have all this fun stuff happen, and then you don't get to have it. But then to reach an accolade like that and have it be because the people in your own state bought the book, that means a lot, because we wrote that book for the people in this state. We thought this probably, you know, Mitch McConnell's considered very much a villain by a lot of liberals and nationally, but we want people in this state to read this book, and whether they're a conservative or whether they're liberal or whichever way they vote, we also want them to see, you know, their state and the counties in their state reflected and the people in their state reflected. And so that meant a lot to us, because we really wanted to write something for us, you know, for all of us.
So Chris, give us a little bit of your background. I know, you know, most people in the state know what KSR is. It's a very popular radio show, website. And you've been with KSR from the very beginning, right?
Mm-hmm. I have. Matt and I went to Transylvania together, and I know we go way back. And when he started KSR, I remember him calling me and saying, "I want to start this thing. It's a blog. It's, you know, there's a lot of Kentucky fans out there. This will be a place they can go for Kentucky sports news." And I was like, you know, I guess so. He was like, "Will you write for you?" He said, "You can write whatever you want to write." He said, "You can write humor, anything you want to write." And you know what? I said, yeah. And he never edited a word I ever said. You know, I've written for that site since, like you said, day one. But before that, I was a copywriter for the J. Peterman catalog, believe it or not, like Elaine from Seinfeld. So I did that, and I worked for an advertising agency for a long time. So I've always, you know, had my finger in writing or some sort of creative, you know, juices in some facet.
Brad, you got a question?
Yeah. So it sounds like, Chris, that, you know, from the beginning that you were kind of more in a production type capacity in writing and those things, and kind of the man behind the scenes. So how's that transition been, kind of coming out from behind the curtain, obviously getting a lot more FaceTime with the book, doing the podcast, you know, the Funkhauser situation, which is a great podcast, by the way.
Thank you.
Is that something that kind of happened on accident?
The coming out from behind the curtain, or the Funkhauser situation? The Funkhauser situation is something that kind of happened organically. When I was working at LEX, I met Lee Cruz, and we hit it off, and we were really on the same wavelength in terms of movies. You know, he's a big '80s comedy guy, and we both love Marx Brothers, so we just clicked on so many things that I don't normally click with other people, and so we decided to try to give this. We said, well, why don't we do a podcast? And Matt actually had the idea. He said, "You guys should do a podcast just talk about pop culture." And so we just did it, and we decided we were just going to do it, and do it like we talk to each other, where we just give each other crap all the time and go at each other. But as far in terms of, like what you said, working in a production capacity, and then sort of, you know, getting out there on the other side of the wall, it's really funny, you know, because I have a friend, and he calls me the KSR ghost. And he calls me that because I've been around since day one, and yet, you know, we'll be out at like a concert or a bar or something like that, and somebody will mention KSR, and my friend Craig will go, "Yeah," he goes, "You like KSR?" And people go, "Yeah, I've read KSR since day one." You know, like, I love Ryan and Drew and Shannon. Well, that's really the second phase of KSR, you know. That whole thing kind of happened. I forget what year that started. Maybe 2010, 2011, something like that, maybe. But people forget there's a whole era before what the radio show is now that involved failed AM radio shows and just all kinds of goofiness on that site. I mean, the comment section on the early days before it was do you guys remember? Did you guys remember what the comment section used to be like on that site?
Yes, it was insane.
Oh, it was so brutal. It was the worst. People were so mean. Anything you'd write, people would just light you up just to kill you. So
the best thing about the internet, bro.
I know, right? Nobody has to give their real name, huh? But no, it's great. And like I said, I mean, it's funny now because, I've been around a long time, but yet people still don't know who I am. I mean, this book is like the first time a lot of people have ever heard of me, and I've been working with KSR in so many different capacities for so long. So,
yeah. So I lived in Lexington for a long time. From 2000 to 2010, I actually worked at Toyota in Georgetown there, and so I was on the KSR train really early. So I've read a lot of your articles. Been a fan of KSR for a long time. But I kind of want to talk about like where you come from and like what shaped your political beliefs. Like I know you lean probably a little left like I do. Like what shaped that though? Like what made you decide that you're not going to, like, I know for me in East Kentucky, it's real easy for me if I want to fall into the right
mm-hmm.
and lock step with those guys, it'd be easy to do. But I lean left with you guys. So what makes you be on the left side?
I'll be honest with you. I'm actually registered an independent. The first person I ever voted for was Ross Perot. I was not very political in high school. I didn't really follow it. I mean, Mason County is a pretty political place, but it was one of those places where I didn't have to think about politics because the same people won over and over and over again. So you never had to think about who's the better choice because the choice is always going to be whoever it was last time, right? And then when I went to Transy, I think I met more people who were politically minded. And then I started sort of, kind of forming my own beliefs. And I still would have called myself that political. And then probably around, I would say probably September, I started becoming kind of more political around the September 11th situation, which I think it was kind of like, all of a sudden, everybody was hyper in tune with the politics of the world at that time, right? And so I kind of fell in there, and I do lean liberal, like especially now more than ever, I think. But I have so many friends who are conservative Republicans, and I have a friend, by the way, one of my best friends doesn't even know I wrote this book. Because I know how much he'd be ashamed of me because he loves Mitch McConnell so much. I never told him. So I've known him for years. And every time I see him, he's like, he'll text me. He'll be like, how things going? How's the family? Everything like that. And I'm like, things are good, Marshall, and I've never told him I wrote this book because I'm afraid he'll be mad at me or something like that. So, I'm one of those people who I have my political leanings, but I will not crucify or denounce somebody else for theirs because I realize that politics is a personal thing for each of us and something we all have to come to on our own terms and how we all think. So yeah.
Chris, as I've been reading the book, you've really got three separate stories being intertwined into one. And that is, of course, the Mitch McConnell part, the part about Matt's decision to run or not against McConnell, and this almost love letter to the state of Kentucky as you guys traveled all 120 counties and wrote something about each one. So how did the actual book itself, like how did it come to be? Did Simon & Schuster just approach you guys or approach Matt and say, hey, we want you to write a book? Like how did that actually begin?
Matt was approached. He was in New York City visiting his girlfriend, and he got an email from a guy at Simon & Schuster, and he said, "Can you come meet with me about a book deal?" And Matt didn't know who the guy was, and he called his agent and he said, "I got an email from this guy Jonathan, and he wants me to come talk to him about a book. Should I go? And his agent was like, that guy's the head of Simon and Schuster. Of course you're going. Like, and Matt didn't really know what it was about. And so when he got in there, Jonathan Karp, who's the head of Simon Schuster, said, I want to produce a book about Mitch McConnell. He has strong political leanings, and he wanted to create a book. Do you remember the Al Franken book? Rush Limbaugh is a big fat idiot. Do you remember that? It was pretty big.
I do.
Maybe back in the late 90s or something like that. That was a pretty big seller, like in terms of political satire. And so I think he was kind of thinking along terms of that. But the funny thing is that he wasn't even going to have Matt write it. He just wanted a Kentuckian, a known Kentucky name to go on the front of the book. So he was prepared to have somebody else ghostwrite it and just put Matt's name on it. Matt was like, no, we should write this, and here's what we should do. We should go tell a story from every county, and it's 120 counties. And they were like, okay, well, all right then. And then they said, you want a ghostwriter? And Matt said, no, I got somebody I want to write. And this is Matt's brain. This all happened while he's sitting in that office. And he said, no, I got somebody I want to write it with. His name's Chris Tomlin. I've known him for years, and he's a good writer. And they went, well, okay then. And that was literally how it went. Like, it was the weirdest. I mean, that's not how books, as far as I know, that's not how books deals get done. But that's how it happened on this one. So we sold it, and then once we started realizing the work we had ahead of us, it started getting really scary, because then we had to realize, we had to be honest about this. We couldn't mail this in. We had to go be in all 120 counties. That was part of the deal. And so we traveled. We traveled every week from probably second week of September until like December 16th. And when I say every week, I mean we were gone every week. Like I'd be home for the weekend sometimes, and Monday morning would come. I'd pack my bag. I'd go to Louisville, get in the car with Matt. We'd go to whichever next section was next. So it was a long, very, very grueling process.
Brad, do you have a question?
Yeah. So, growing up as a Kentucky kid, as you traveled around from county to county, what was the most interesting thing about the history of our state that you learned that you had no clue of until you went on your journey around the state?
I think my favorite story in the book is when we went to Western Kentucky and learned about the Asian carp situation. That blew my mind. And for people who haven't read the book, we basically went down there looking for what to write about. And somebody said, well, have you heard about the Asian carp? And we were like, no, what about the Asian carp? And they said, well, they've ruined all of our lakes. Like they've killed all the fish and everything like that. And what we came to find out is that back in the 70s, farmers thought Asian carp would be good for the algae in their ponds. So they all bought a bunch and put them in their ponds. And then the first time it flooded, all these fish went into like Lake Barkley and everything like that, and basically ate everything in it. And so all the other fish died. So all that's left in these lakes are just these giant, slimy, awful looking fish. And we went out with Wade White, who was the judge executive of Lyon County, and he's a Republican. So he's been in a Mitch McConnell commercial, to be honest. And he took us out, great guy, took us out with his son, showed us how to bow fish. And what we do is we stand on the perch of the bow of the ship, and he would troll along with the boat, and then he would stop and shine all the lights at one time. And when he'd do it, all these fish would just leap out of the water. Like it was insane. And you would try to shoot them with a bow and arrow out of the sky. And it was the weirdest thing, maybe one of the weirdest things I've ever done in my life. But the point of the story, point of that is that I had no idea that was going. Did you guys ever heard that Asian carp situation before?
I had never heard of that till Matt started talking about it on the radio show one day, and I had never heard of it.
It's nuts. And
the thing I thought was interesting is the lady that has the basically has the business now. to export the carp, which I thought was great, a great solution. But I wonder if it's going to eventually have the king cobra effect, where when people figure out that there is money in exporting the fish, where you might create a problem by people actually breeding them to make money to ship them off.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah. It's so ironic that she sells them back to Asia, which is really funny, But it's very odd, and I haven't met anybody. Well, I don't know about you guys, but to me, Western Kentucky is kind of this mystery place. Like, I don't know really anything about it. I know that Paducah's down there, and I know Murray's down there.
Big farm, right?
Yeah, but I've never been to Hickman County before. I'd never been to any of those places, Wickliffe, Kentucky, and so going down there was it was uncharted territory for us both. I didn't really know people from down there. So that was a real challenge in Western Kentucky, trying to find stories, because you didn't have a lot to go on down there. They might as well be the Midwest. They don't really feel like Kentucky down there that much.
Right.
Let me ask you a question. Go ahead, JD.
Let's go challenge a little bit about this whole podcast, but I want to get this, because I definitely want to get through the Mitch bashing, but I also want to be fair. What has Mitch got right as his time as a U.S. Senator for Kentucky? Has he got anything right?
It depends on who you ask. Obviously, he's done some things for some people on the line, because he's been there for so long. I think he has. I think the best thing you can say about Mitch McConnell is that he has been he's a brilliant political operator. He knows what to do. He has courted the religious right by, he's not even particularly religious. He's courted them by voting in their interests, and there are places that think he's great because of what he's done for Henderson, Kentucky. Perfect example. He had a surplus of money. He got them a whole new waterfront down there, and that's great. So they like him down there. But the story behind that's even crazy, which was that he had a surplus of money, and he called a buddy of his in Henderson and said, "Hey, what do you get? You guys need anything?" And the guy is like, "Yeah, we could use a new waterfront." And Mitch was like, "Okay." So, even that's a weird, that's a weird story. Like, he is a very savvy politician. You can't take that away from him. I don't think we do in the book. I think we do call a spade and say, look, obviously the man's good at what he does. Our issue with Mitch was that he's done it all in such an oddly impersonal way. You normally think of politicians as being, especially somebody who's been in office as long as he is, as being somebody who's beloved in some way. Mitch McConnell's not beloved, even by people who vote for him. There are people, so many people we met, they're like, "Yeah, I voted for him. I voted for him every time." Do you like him? He's like, "I don't know." They don't really have an opinion on him, because I don't think you can get a beat on what his personality is. And I think that's what makes him such an anomaly. I think it's going to be odd for some people to read this book and come away not knowing anything really more about Mitch McConnell as a person. But there's not a lot of stories. If there were stories out there about Mitch McConnell, what he's like, what his personality's like, I would have thought we would have heard him talking to 120 counties full of people, and they're just not really out there. People who know him, they don't really know him. And that's a very odd, off-putting thing, and strange for somebody who's been reelected so many times. So, what has he got right? He has somehow managed to garner a base that is going to follow him whatever he does, without shaking hands, without going out and kissing babies and going places and doing rallies and stuff like that. So it's pretty impressive what he's done. You can't take that away from him at all.
Chris, I have a question, just as far as in reading the book, and I guess I always kind of thought this anyway, but it feels like Kentucky to be, we're not a huge state by any means, but it's, no matter where you go in the state, it seems like the people are different. Like Eastern Kentucky people are a certain way. Western Kentucky people are a certain way. Then you got Northern Kentucky, and we're all Kentuckians. We're all Kentucky fans, except for those people in Louisville we won't mention. But is that true? Like, did you find that in your travels, like wherever you were at, as far as a region, the book is split up into sections of counties. That's, you write about those in the chapters. Did you find that to be the case, that we're all Kentuckians, but we're different depending on where you're at?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. There's a common thread in the hospitality, and I don't just say that to sound Southern and folksy. That's a real thing. Wherever we went, we met such wonderful, kind people, whether they agreed with the book we were writing or not. And we tried to approach everybody not from hey, will you tell us something bad about Mitch McConnell? I mean, I'm sure a lot of people are going to think that's how he wrote the book, but that's not how he wrote the book. We just went out and met people. And it's really interesting. There are huge differences in different parts of the state. Northern Kentuckians are they're more like Cincinnati. I mean, they seem like people who live in suburbs, right? Even if they don't. Like, even Pendleton County is kind of considered Northern Kentucky, but even they sort of act like a Boone County or a Campbell County or something like that. They still Eastern Kentucky is, to me, amazing. I think the nicest people in this country live in Eastern Kentucky, and that's not lip service, because you guys are in Eastern Kentucky. That is God's honest truth. I feel like people of Eastern Kentucky are so genuine and so kind and so protective of one another, in such a really beautiful way. They're protective about how they are portrayed and how their neighbors are portrayed. And we wanted to definitely make sure when we wrote this book that we did not portray any Kentuckians in any sort of a silly light, unless they were, over the top silly in a way that they knew it. But Eastern Kentucky is just amazing. I love it. Well, I knew when we got the Eastern Kentucky stretch, I was going to have a great time, and it didn't let me down. Western Kentucky's a little standoffish, and when I say standoffish, I mean, like I said, they don't feel to me like Kentucky. They feel like another part. Like, once you get past, I don't know, trying to think of what counties down there that would be a good marker. If you dial back about 6 counties from the far west, it changes, and people down there, they seem a little bit more like you would think, like typical Midwesterns. The southern part is gone down there, I feel like. But yeah, I mean, for us, it was really neat, because I mean, like, all these counties have their own personalities, and they're really neat. And getting out and seeing those, and all of us, you guys, me, we've all known people in our lives that are like, yeah, I knew that guy. He was from Trigg County. I've never been to Trigg County. I've never been to Trigg County. They're going to Trigg County, and now I'm like, oh yeah, so-and-so's from here, and puts it all together for you. I would tell everybody to go visit all 120 counties. It's neat. And I mean, it's a tough feat to do, but it's cool to have done it,
Brad, do you have a question?
Yeah. So, we're obviously in Kentucky, we get defensive about stereotypes about our state. But honestly, even within the state, we have certain perceptions or expectations, of other pods within our state. So was there any places that you went where the stereotypes were kind of challenged, where it was complete opposite of what you expected when you went into that area?
Oh, that's a good question. I think, yeah, we've talked about it. One of the places Matt and I have talked about the most is Whitesburg, which is Letcher County. You talk about the state. You talk about what's going on there, not being like what you think is going on there. Letcher County is like Exhibit A in Kentucky, because they got Apple Shop down there. Have you guys been to Whitesburg before? Any of you guys?
I've been there, yeah, but I would like to go. I would actually like to go check Apple Shop out after what I've heard about it.
Yeah, so you go down there. First, it takes forever to get there. It's impossible to get there. And you think, I'm going out in the middle of nowhere, like nowhere. And you get there, and all of a sudden, they've got pride flags, they've got art galleries, they've got record stores playing like German techno music. And it's like, this is so not what I thought it was going to be. And so it's really cool when you come across a place like that. You know, Matt and I talked to the book club tonight. The only vegan restaurant we encountered in a town less than 20,000 people on our trip was in Whitley City in McCreary County. And they had it right in the middle of town, right next to town hall. They have a vegan restaurant, and it sells like holistic medicines and stuff like that. And I'm in there, I'm like, is this place do pretty well? And she's like, oh yeah, we do great. You know, and it's fun when you find those kind of diamonds in the rough out there that are not like what's around them. And I think definitely Whitesburg and Whitley City and some of those places, like it's really neat when you come around the corner expecting to see more of the same as you've seen in the other counties, and all of a sudden there's something you could not have ever imagined.
So as far as the book goes, like, how did you all finally, like, when you got to the end? I mean, you said this is the finished product. How did you know that you finally had where you wanted it to be? Like, does that make sense? Like, I know you went through all the counties, but you finally said what you wanted to say in the book. Like, how did you decide, okay, this is it?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. The editing process of this book was I thought the traveling was hard. Man, it was nothing compared to what the editing process was like.
Grueling.
Oh man, it was. I mean, Matt and I basically would go through each chapter, county by county, and we'd be up. We would start after his radio show at 12 o'clock. And this was most of January. We would start after his radio show at 12 o'clock. I'd drive down to Louisville, and we would sit in a board, like some boardroom or something we could find to work together in. We'd sit there sometimes until 2 a.m. We would be absolutely just knackered, you know, and it would be pouring over everywhere. Is this the best story from this county? Is there a better joke here? Is this the right thing? Do we need more from this person? Do we need to call this person back and get some more clarification? Because I mean, you know, Matt and I didn't want to be stereotyped either as, you know, as a negative version of Kentuckians. I mean, we're writing a book. I mean, we're writing a book for a national audience, you know, so we also had to be protective that we weren't going to be laughed at by the literati who just thought we were a couple of bumpkins who landed a book deal. So we wanted to work really hard on that and make sure too that we turned out the best product we could. And I think by the time that we turned it in that last night, and it was like 3:30 in the morning, you know, we all, Matt and me and our two research assistants, Eli and Matt Young, we sat around, looked at each other, and it was like the biggest exhale you've ever had, because it was like up until this point, it had just been so stressful, and now it was finally ready to roll. There was nothing else we could do with it. We were out of time. You know, this was it, and we were sending it off, and it felt really good. We were very, very proud of it. Yeah.
Chris, I kind of have a specific question, and do you guys, Brad and JD, do you know who the tracker is? Have you heard of the tracker at all?
No.
All right. So
I think it was in a Leonardo DiCaprio movie about his
So the McConnell camp hired someone to follow Matt around while he was on this tour. And Matt would refer to him as the tracker on the radio show. And you guys talk about him a lot in the book. You know, he's mentioned a lot. Did you guys actually, by the time it was all said and done, did you befriend the tracker? I mean, did you guys end up being friendly?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. And it was so weird at the beginning because, like, I know he was at the first place we went. Like, the first day we went to lunch, it was in Grayson County, and he was sitting over in the corner, and he was just sitting there eating a hamburger, and just Matt goes, see the guy over there? He goes, he's following us. And I said, how do you know? He goes, because I've seen him at KS Bar a couple of times. And I know somebody who knows him, and he works for McConnell's campaign. And so it was a little weird the first time I realized we were being followed, because my questions are, is this guy following us everywhere? Like, is he literally in a car behind us, like following us, to the hotel? And I didn't know where the parameters were. And after a while, we realized if this guy's going to be in all these places, we might as well make him part of the show. So it got to the point that, like, Matt would do his show, because he did his show when we were on the road. He would take his radio stuff, and he would usually post up somewhere, whether it's a hotel lobby or a lobby of a bank or somewhere, and he would set up his stuff, and generally I would go out and drive around town and get some local color and talk to people while he was doing his show. And if that tracker could figure out where the show was coming from, he would come and he would show up. He'd usually show up in the second hour, and he'd just sit there and watch. And sometimes he would just sit there like this. That's really off. It's really kind of creepy just to have somebody sitting over the corner, filming you like this, and so.
Yeah.
But he's nice. Here's the kicker. He's a nice guy. Like, I would see him there, and he became like a friend, or at least an acquaintance, because I would know him. He'd be the only person in the room I'd know. So I'd go over, sit at the table with him. I'd be like, "Hey, how you doing?" He'd be very friendly, and I'd be like, "Did you drive down here this morning?" He'd be like, "Yeah, they called me and they told me to come down here this morning." And he's just a guy doing the job,
Right. I feel like you're Robert De Niro and Goodfellas waking up the cops. Hey, man, come on, we're leaving.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was like. Yeah, exactly. And I made that exact same reference to Matt. I said, that's where he knocks on the window. Come on, let's go. And that's what it was like. You never knew where he was going to pop up, but it was weird to think that there were eyes everywhere on us, and that I'd never had that experience, because I'm not a public figure. Matt's a public figure, and he's also somewhat of a political figure, but I'm not. So that was weird for me,
Yeah.
Well, Chris, I have a kind of a specific question, and this is something. You guys were in Eastern Kentucky, and I knew you were going to be in Eastern Kentucky, and you and I were texting one evening, and I want you to tell this story, because I think if you haven't read the book, there's nothing more Eastern Kentucky than this. You guys were coming, I think you were coming from Whitesburg that evening, and I was still in Pikeville, and we were texting. We were going to see if we could get together for dinner. And you said, well, we can't, it's going to be late. We got to stop in Floyd County. And so you guys stop in Floyd County, and you end up walking downtown, and there's not a whole lot going on. That late in the evening, Eastern Kentucky shuts down about 7:00. And there's a barbershop that you guys walk in. Tell the story of what happened when you went into said barbershop.
It was great. So we were just looking for people to talk to, that was our MO. We would just, if we knew somebody in that county, we'd call them. If we didn't know somebody in that county, we would just drive to the county seat, park, and get out and walk around and meet people and find out who we met. And in Floyd County, we didn't have anybody like that. So we just went and were walking around, and like Jimmy said, it was dark, and there was a barber shop that was open. So we stop in there, and there's all these old men sitting there, like you'd see in a barbershop, but they weren't there to get their haircut. They were having a Bible study group. And they were like, "Yeah, come on in, be part of our Bible study group." And so they handed us Bibles, and we spent the evening in this barbershop, which was it was like a Norman Rockwell barbershop. Like, it was as America's barbershop as you could get. Imagine the ones that all four of us went to as kids. Still exists as in Floyd County. And they were so kind to us, and so nice, and they were so welcoming. And and I don't know what those guys' political affiliations were. We never learned what they were. It was one of those special moments on the road where it was like we were just people who met each other, and they were so incredibly kind and gracious to us and invited us to be a part of what they were doing. And they never judged us or looked down at us or asked us or were skeptical of us. And that's what I'm talking about with the people in this state. I cannot, overstate how how there's a real innate kindness out there, you know, and it's in the places that you don't expect it. You know, I mean, we walked into some of the dinkiest little bait shops and found the nicest people. You know, one of the nicest people I met on the trip was a guy who was a rabid Trump supporter who ran a gun shop in Metcalfe County, and he was so nice. I mean, like, it just, people are people,
Wow.
you know, and we all have these political affiliations, but it's so nice when you can break through those and talk to people, you know, as they are, and they can talk to you as you are, and those are the most special points of the whole trip for me. I mean, as a features writer and a profiler, I love that stuff, and I just there's so many great memories of the people that we met on this trip.
Brad, do you have a question?
Yeah. So what are some of the outtakes from the journey that didn't make the book? Maybe a crazy experience, or you got stuck in somewhere and you guys were like, whoa, we got to get out of here quick. Was there anything exciting that happened that didn't make the book?
I'm trying to think. We didn't have any close calls, as it were. Most of the good stuff got in, unless it was just too, you know, inside baseball. We trying to think here. We went on the most rural road I've ever been on in Elliott County, to the point that I thought, A, it was never going to end, and B, we were going to get killed, because we kept going. The road went from asphalt to gravelly asphalt, like where the asphalt broke up, to gravel, to dirt, to just 2 tracks for tires. And it just kept going. And on paper, we're like, well, is this coming out where we think it's going to go? We had no idea. And all of a sudden we started seeing these houses, and they all had no trespassing signs on them. And I told Matt, I'm like, you know, people who live this far out don't want to be found already. And then when you put no trespassing signs on the walls, you know, we do not want to break down here. And I think the road was even called something like Quicksand Ridge or something. Like, it was straight out of like a country song. And I remember thinking, I really hope we don't get stuck here, because it was starting to get really dicey there for a little bit. And I thought, what are we going to do if we have to walk up to, we can't walk up to these doors.
Hey, use your phone, baby.
These people don't want us walking up to their doors. Most of them have bridges that are cut off on both ends just to get across the creek to their houses. I'm not walking up to with these doors. So I was very relieved when we got through to the other side there. But yeah, there were times when you would find yourself in a place but I mean, you know, we're all Kentucky. We've all had those experiences. I mean, that's no different experience. I'm sure all 3 of you guys have had, where you got lost and you're like, man, I don't know about this place. You know, that happens a bit, you know, but no, we never really met with any ill will. I thought we would, to be honest. I thought that there would be people out there who would not want us around because they knew of the book we were writing. And even people who disagreed with us were very nice to us. So it really could not have been a more positive experience. And I really mean that.
So Matt goes and meets with the guy from Simon Schuster, and he comes back to you and recruits you to help join on this huge task. I mean, this ain't going to be no easy feat.
Mm-hmm.
So all these clips
Cool.
got to be done. Like, what takes persuading, or was you just gun ho ready to do it?
Oh, did it take me a bit? No, I was all in, because I knew what my part of the heavy lifting would be. Yeah. And I loved the idea. Like, I mean, if you said, go find people that are awesome and write about them and tell their stories, I'll do that all day long. That's my favorite thing to do. Now, if Matt had said this is going to be all political, I probably would have maybe been a little more reticent, because I might not have been as interested in writing a book that's just a political book, but one thing we wanted to set out to do was we wanted to write a political book for people who don't read political books, right? So when he told me we're going to go to these counties and find out what we can find and talk to everybody we can, I was like, let's go. This sounds like a dream. So I was very happy.
So Chris, 2 questions, and then we'll start circling back to how you and I first met. Did you find it difficult, when you would interview people, were they really forthcoming about their thoughts about Mitch McConnell, or were people more reserved? Like, did you have a hard time getting people to even talk about him?
Yeah, there were people who didn't want to say anything. It's so funny. We met so many Democrats and Republicans both who did not want to speak against him. Republicans, I get, because he can make or break you. Like he can get behind you, or he can leave you out to sink or swim. But the funny thing was the Democrats who didn't want to say anything, because there were so many Democrats who were elected officials in Republican counties, and they knew they had it good already. So they're like, I'm lucky to even be a Democrat judge executive in a Republican county. I'm not rocking this boat, So Republicans would not want to speak against him because they were afraid of retaliation, and Democrats were not wanting to speak against him because they were afraid then that the Republican constituents of their counties would see them in a different light. And then for some reason, there were just regular people didn't want to talk about him, and I'm like, why would you be like? Why would the person at the antique store in Paintsville, like, why would you be? What is Mitch McConnell going to do to you? But he has this personality where I think people are a little afraid of him, and I think it's because he's kind of made his name on destroying people. Not that he's going to come destroy somebody in an antique store, but I mean, people definitely see him as an intimidating figure, I think, and so, yeah, when we would say, hey, what are your thoughts on Mitch McConnell? Most people didn't want to just come out. I mean, didn't want to just come out and start going to town railing on him. Sometimes we would ask people and they'd give us great stuff. And we'd say, can we put that in the book? And they would say, no, I'm a teacher, or no, you can't because my husband's on the city council, or something like that. But there's a lot of stuff we had to strike from the record. And we wanted to be respectful of that. And whenever somebody said this is not, you can't put this in the book, we would. I had a tape recorder. I would shut that tape recorder off and set it on the table. But yeah, we did have trouble getting people to talk about it. Yeah.
Now I did hear today that you had written a really nice section on the fire down below that had to be cut from the book.
Yeah, Matt made me cut that. I wrote an amazing synopsis of the Steven Seagal movie Fire Down Below for the Breathitt County chapter. It was several paragraphs long, and I was very proud of it. And Matt said, we cannot dedicate this much of a chapter to describing a Steven Seagal movie. And I let him have that because his name is a bigger font on the book than mine. So
that's funny.
Yeah.
All right, so I want to kind of, I guess, end our discussion on how you and I actually first met. And the chapter in the book about Martin County has to do with the water crisis that went on here January of 18. And Chris was at that time was the producer for a TV show in Lexington that Matt anchored called Hey Kentucky. And they came up here to do a story on the situation that was going on. And Chris interviewed me that day. And it was funny because the guy that was the cameraman was a guy named Ronnie that I actually did a mortgage for. I actually financed the guy's house.
He's the best, Ronnie is, yeah.
We met up at the water plant and we did an interview that aired on Hey Kentucky. And the funny thing about that, and I want people to know, Chris has always been real invested in our situation here. And you could tell that based on what he wrote about Martin County in the book. Chris, talk a little bit about, because the three of us are from Martin County. Our podcast is based out of here. Talk to us a little bit about your experience coming to Martin County.
Yeah, so we had Martin County had kind of come on our radar after you had the kerfluffle at the water board meeting with Gary Michael Hunt. That's Gary Michael Hunt, yeah. And so we had shown that on Hey Kentucky, and a lot of people had been very interested in that. And so, we always, when you first see that video, it's easy to pass that off as some sort of crazy viral video that you don't go back and learn the whole story on. I mean, we watch viral videos all day long of people who are doing stuff, and you don't know the whole story, what happened before that, what happened after that. And then when I think maybe a few days later, something else about Martin County came up, and it was we tied it to the Gary Michael Hunt situation. And so we were sitting there one day in the bullpen at WLEX, and we were like, we should go down there and do something about this, right? And produce something about this situation down there, because this is a very unique situation, and maybe we can, help some people to know about this that don't know about it. So we did a lot of research and reached out to a lot of people, and then we brought a camera crew down and spent the day down there in Inez, and we talked to Nina McCoy and Gary Ball and Judge Callahan, and we really, I had a really strong reaction to what I saw that day, because I couldn't believe what was happening. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The people I met were having so much trouble, and yet still so resilient and so hopeful, even though they were really the end of their ropes. And so Jimmy was nice enough to speak with us on that piece as a new member of the water board, and I remember coming home from Martin County that day, and I didn't even, I usually listen to music or podcasts or what have you in the car. And I remember for a large chunk of that drive home, not even listening to anything and just thinking about, what I'd seen that day. And so that situation in Martin County is something that blew my mind. To me, that's something that should not have been happening in the United States of America. And I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I couldn't believe how many people didn't know about that, right? Because that was just such a terrible situation. And so, we wrote that piece, and Jimmy was kept in touch with us, and we did a lot of follow-ups on Hey Kentucky, and I think I have always watched the story down there. I still subscribe to a lot of Facebook groups in Martin County, so I'm always keeping tabs on everything that's going down there and the people involved. And Jimmy, I text you sometimes and say, "Hey, what's going on with this?" Or I read this. What's happening down there? Is everything okay? And it's just something I have a lot of strong feelings for, and I appreciate you guys opening up your doors to us when we were down there, letting us help tell that story.
Well, I tell people, and I was telling Brad earlier today, when that started going on, and I have to admit, I'm in the book. I'm quoted in the book, which is pretty cool, Chris. I ain't gonna lie.
Oh, we couldn't have done it without you. I really appreciate that.
Listen, that's all we've heard for 3 weeks now.
Look, I'm in a book. My name is in a book that's on the New York Times.
Name dropping itself.
What do you want me to do?
Hey, Jimmy don't care. That's me.
But no, as far as, like you and I have talked about this, when the situation started, it was one of those deals where I knew how, and this is what's in the book, I knew the bed was on fire. I just didn't know how high the flames were. And, you get in that, and I think the coverage of it had been pretty local to that point. So it wasn't really going anywhere until you showed up and did your piece, and once it went statewide from Hey Kentucky, it wasn't long after that we started getting money. We started seeing money, kind of flowing in. So I've always given credit to Chris and to Matt, and the guys at Hey Kentucky, the whole crew, because once that story hit and it became a bigger story than just here locally. That's when, the tide really turned. We started seeing some funds roll in. And, I told Chris the other day, we were talking, I said, you wouldn't even recognize it now. It's just such a different situation, and we're definitely on the right path. So I just wanted to thank Chris on here. We've always talked over the phone, but what you guys did, not only putting it in the book, but also, what you did with Hey Kentucky, man, we just, it was really helpful and it helped us a lot.
Well, I appreciate that. Of all my 3 years at Hey Kentucky, that is the story that will stick with me forever. And being able to cover that and like if I was even slightly able to get that story to somebody who wouldn't have seen it otherwise, then I can always have that solace, because you guys really needed a lot of help at that point, and I'm glad that other people who could give you that help came through for you.
Yeah, no, it was, man. It was a big deal, and it's what I always say. I got a pal out of it too, and and we've done a lot of good things since that time. It's it's just a completely different situation now. Guys, we got any more questions for Chris?
I've got 2 more things, man.
All right, hit it.
Do quick. Chris, I want you to tell your boy Lee Cruz I said, "Oh, Sookie, Sookie."
I will.
Well,
Oh,
did it freeze up?
I think he did.
You froze up, JD. I mean, that's a real picture, though.
Yep. That's old school back in the day. Like, I remember this Lee.
Nah, he's
Tell Lee Cruz. And am I good? Am I good?
yeah. You're back now.
Oh, there you go. You're back now. We lost the second part of that.
All right. Got a for 2 weeks now. So I'll ask your opinion. Little Mermaid or Aladdin? This is very serious.
Oh, Little Mermaid or Aladdin? I'm an Aladdin guy, but it's because I'm a comedy guy. You can't. I think Robin Williams' performance in Aladdin's the best voice performance in any movie ever. I mean, like they redrew the movie to do what to fit what he did on the microphone. So I've always thought that was awesome.
Look, we're going to have a serious conversation about your movie choices. Little Mermaid is clearly the better of those 2 movies.
Really?
Oh, I love the look. We won't go into it, but I'm a real big fan of Ariel. Let's just say that. Every time I go to Disney, I seek out, you know how it is. You go around, get your picture taken, you take your kids, right? You get their picture taken.
Yeah.
I immediately go to where Ariel's at and get and Pocahontas.
Do you take your kids? Or you just go by yourself to get?
Oh no, I go by myself. I mean, if the kids are a bonus, if they want to go see her, that's fine. But Dad's going. JD says that Jasmine is, he feels that way about Jasmine. So
I see who
Jasmine.
Was that?
Ain't nothing wrong with Jasmine.
I liked who was the Hercules princess? I kind of liked her. She had a little sarcastic bent to her.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, I like a little crazy.
all right, guys. Well, Chris, man, we really appreciate you coming on with us. It's been a pleasure to get to sit down and talk to you. For those of you that are watching, this is the book, Mitch Please, which is also one of the greatest titles ever. How many times have we said Mitch Please on the podcast, guys? I mean, too many.
We talk about nothing that has nothing to do with anything. I'll just say Mitch Please.
Mitch Please. How did you come up with that, Chris? Was that something that just popped in your head, or was it?
They had a terrible title in place. It was called like Mutant Senate Ninja Turtle or something like that. It was terrible. And Matt called me in one day. He's like, "We got to come up with a new title. This is going to be the title." And I was like, "Oh man!" And Matt was like, "We got to come up with the title now." And so, for some reason, that was the first thing out of my mouth. And I just, I thought of it. I said it, and I was like, "That's it." And they liked it. And Since then, it's been actually co-opted by the Bears fans about Mitchell Trubisky. So we did it first.
We just had a viewer drop off, by the way.
But no, if you're watching this book, Mitch, please, it is, it talks a lot about McConnell, but what I have found, it truly is, and I've heard Matt say it, and I think I've heard you say it too, Chris, it truly is a love letter to the state of Kentucky. It is, they go through every county, tell something kind of cool or something that's happened in every county. Some of the issues, like you got one place that needs a bridge that can't get one, and then another place that's got a bridge sitting in the middle of a field, that is not being used at all. It's all kinds of cool stuff like that. It's been a great read. I've had a ball, and Chris and Matt actually do a book club through a YouTube page with KSR. And you guys did one tonight, right, Chris?
We did one just about 2 hours ago. Yeah.
And so, you can kind of, that's actually how I've read the book. I've kind of followed along, with the book club so I could read the chapters and then come back and listen to them talk about some of the behind the scenes. So as far as getting the book, Chris, you can get it on Amazon, I know, because that's where I got mine. And then I'm sure you can get it at local bookstores. Brad's been listening to the Audible version. Is there any other place that people can pick it up?
No, Amazon's probably the easiest right now in this situation. Otherwise, I would say go to a local bookstore and support your local bookstores. If you got one that you can support online, I would recommend that because those places need our support right now. Amazon does not; they're doing fine. But if you want it fast, you can go to Amazon. But yeah, the Audible is also an option as well. So,
I mean, Brad had mentioned, Chris does it's not been on in a while, I think, since he started doing the book and those things, but it's called The Funkhauser Situation, and it's a pop culture podcast that he does with Lee Cruz, and it's what Brad was talking about earlier. Chris, do you expect to get to fire that up again now that you're done with the book?
Man, I hope so. There's nothing I like better than arguing with Lee about movies we've seen, and he has a lot of opinions, and I like to take him to task, and we have a good time. We're pretty hard on each other, but hopefully we're talking about that now, and hopefully we'll get that back in the works and back up and running when the world is a normal place,
right,
or at least a little more
is
normal than this, right?
So, and you can find that under the KSR brand on iTunes is where I always get it from, is where I download it from. I'm sure it's in all kinds of different places, but when that starts going out, if you just want to laugh, listen to that. I mean, if you like pop culture like I do, because I was telling Chris, I like comic books and things like that. They talk about movies. They talk about all kinds of stuff. It's just a lot of fun to listen to. And if you want a good laugh, it's a good podcast to check out. So, Chris, again, man, we appreciate you coming on. I've had a ball talking to you. And so as we always end our show, from myself, from JD, and from Brad, no matter how bad your week's been, no matter how bad your day's going, if you just add bourbon, it always gets a little bit better. Mitch, please.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys. Stay with us here, Chris.